Kaja Klimek, prosto z Octopus Film Festival w Gdańsku. Mam przepiękny widok za oknem na doki, na stocznie, tam ciągle ludzie pracują nad tym, żeby właśnie statki wyglądały jak najpiękniej albo funkcjonowały. A my dzisiaj spotykamy się, żeby porozmawiać z fantastyczną reżyserką i pankową, myślę, zadam jej też to pytanie. Penelope Spheeris jest naszą gościnią. A tak jak widzicie, spotykamy się w internecie, więc wielka prośba i zachęta do Was, drodzy widzowie i widzki. Piszcie w komentarzach swoje pytania, jeśli jakieś się pojawią, a ja je przekażę naszej gościnie. Jest mi bardzo miło, że będę z nią rozmawiać, ale oczywiście nie będzie się to odbywało po polsku, bo to bez sensu, więc teraz już pora przejść na język angielski. So, Penelope, that was in Polish. I wonder if you understood anything apart of your name, which I mentioned also.
Only my name.
Only your
That's
name.
all I understood, but it's a very beautiful language.
Yeah, it
I
has
wish
a
I
melody.
spoke Polish.
Yeah, I only said, as I said before, I encouraged people to ask questions and comment on our conversation. It's really lovely to have you here with us. I also told them that behind you, beside the window, I can see the docks and the shipyard, and it's like a really industrial environment that would really suit your films and your characters and the people that you made your films about. So what I wanted to ask you, because of course I described you as a punk and the director, or the director and the punk, because that's kind of like a symbiosis in my eyes that connects those two worlds. But I wanted to ask you at first about the music. About punk music. Before you started to make films about the subculture, the people, kids, rebels, and the spirit of punk, what did you think about the music itself? Were you a fan? Was that like close to your heart that you were moshing in the pit with other people? How was that? And when you decided that it's time to make a story about it?
Well, I discovered punk rock music shortly after the Sex Pistols started the movement in London, and I felt at that time like I found my true self. And you know, I wasn't young at that point. You know, I think I might have been 35 or something when I made the first Decline of Western Civilization. And like I said, I've identified with the philosophy and the ethics and the whole standards of punk rock ever since. And I did the Decline Part 2 in 1987 and the Decline 3 in 97. And I have a punk rock boyfriend for 22 years from the Decline Part 3, which was about homeless punks. And he was a homeless punk, and then he moved into $1 million house. So
oh, history.
I love punk rock. And I love my punk boyfriend.
Sounds like a typical story about punk rock, I would say.
Oh yeah, except, you know, sometimes 22 years, you know, is pretty good for me.
So how the music influenced you as the filmmaker, I would say, because of course you can make a different films about the same subject. You can approach it in a different ways. But when you were connected with the culture and spending time with those people, how that influenced your style as a filmmaker? Were you trying to be as punk as possible as a filmmaker, or you were more observing and trying to find the distance to how to depict this world?
Well, what I wanted to do when I made the first Decline of Western Civilization was to respect the way that punk was evolving, and it was very raw, very crude, very honest, very assertive. I don't want to say aggressive, but sometimes aggressive, yeah. And I wanted to make the style of the editing and shooting to follow those themes. And I think it worked because people today, I mean, I did the Decline a few years before MTV started. And then after that, they started doing the editing and the shooting the same way. And people say, how come you follow you copy MTV. And I'm like, no, they copied me. So I try to respect the way that punk rock is when I cut my movie, you know, my Decline series anyway.
I wanted to ask about the Decline Part 1. I mean, the very specific one that we are screening at the festival, because it seems that you are so close to the music, to the very event as the gig is, but at the same time, it's really... I would say well made. I mean, like, it's not really shaking. It's just like the shots are really visible. You can like really see even the sweat on the foreheads. Was that difficult on the technical level to do that? Because it feels like the place can be also, let me add just that. It feels that the place can be a bit like dangerous for the person holding the camera, that it's not aware of what's going on around. Like how that works on this like technical level.
Well, on the first decline of Western civilization, that was, you know, 1980, and we didn't have the digital technology at that point. So I was shooting 16 millimeter film, and I always shoot one camera when I do my documentaries, and I have another cameraman working. And the cameraman for the first decline told me after the first night of the shooting, he said, if you want me to continue, you have to get a shark cage, because it's so crazy, because I put it down in the pit, you know. I put myself up on a platform, but it, you know, it gets pretty crazy in the pit, you know, especially back in the days when not everybody knew the rules, you know.
Yeah, especially when we see those scenes that somebody's like actually hitting another person and throwing them off the stage. It really seems like something that couldn't probably happen today, even at the punk concert, because everybody's just like, you know, more careful and, you know, like subtle in a way. Even when they are dancing like crazy, they are more aware of, you know, what's going on around maybe.
Well, that was the thing about punk rock back in the day, was it was pushing the limits, you know, on everything. Not just music, but, you know, the clothing style and the haircuts and you know, the girls wear combat boots. And, you know, there is a sequence in the first decline where Lee Ving is on stage. He's in the band Fear, leader of the band Fear. And this girl gets up and starts pushing him. Yeah, it's really
strong scene.
I know Lee. I know Lee for many, many years. You don't push Lee Ving, you know. So he pushed her back, you know. But that wouldn't happen today because, there's too many bouncers. And, well, first of all, there are no concerts today.
Yeah, of course. We are talking in the August of 2020, so that's another thing that we should add. Yeah,
and I have to say I'm very glad that I was able to film all the concerts that I filmed over the years. Because now you can't even go out, you know what I mean? I feel bad for the young people that can't go out.
Yeah, and actually when I watched the Decline and those scenes at the concerts, I was like, oh my God, I would kind of like to be there, because now we are just like separated from everything like that. So, but let me back up for a moment, because that's also interesting, because you are saying it was rough, it was independent. From the film we can see that nobody really understood what it's all about, so there were people who were trying to explain what actually those kids are doing, and that it's really not dangerous, that it's music and the culture. Yeah. So when you decided to make a film about it, like of course, let's be honest, apart the technical aspect, there's also financial aspect of every film production. So how did you finance it? Was it difficult to find money for that, or you saved money and you self-funded it? Or like how that worked?
Well, I had a friend, and he said he knew some guy, a businessman, who wanted to finance a porno movie, and would I direct a porno movie? And I said, absolutely not. But how about let's take him to a punk rock concert?
Okay, if they want something
and
rough.
Then he could check out the punk rock concert and see if he wants to finance that movie. So his name is Jeff Prettyman. He's a lovely man, and so he decided he would pay for it. Originally, I told him I was just going to shoot it on 8mm, but then when and it was cost $12,000 American dollars, and then we realized, oh, this is too important. We have to do it in 16mm. So he agreed, and the budget cost 10 times what I originally told him.
Okay, and he was okay with it. Wow, what a dedicated fan of punk.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
I told him 12,000, and it ended up 120,000. But 2 years ago, the film was inducted into the Library of Congress National Film Registry. I don't know if you know or not.
Yeah, of course, of course. All the most important films are there, and the ones that are like structuring the history of American cinema and culture. So that's like where it belongs, basically.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess he was definitely happy he made the investment.
Yeah, after so many years, but it still paid off in a way. Yeah, of course. The prestige that comes with that, it's also a big one. But you said when you were talking about filming the culture and the people that you wanted to respect them in a way. What did that actually mean on the like practical level? Because as far as I've been to the concerts, when there is a camera, everybody starts to switch their attitude, and they are a bit more like, observing and, not paying attention to, okay, we have a crew on board and they are with us. But was that difficult to make those kids and young people like in a way unaware of the fact that you are still there filming them, or how that worked on this?
Well, I think there's both elements. Sometimes they act up because the camera's there. And sometimes, the punk way would be to ignore it. And that's what most of them did, And a lot of the people at the concerts were my friends. And so they were cool about me shooting, It's not like today where everybody has a camera and you're supposed to get your releases and everything legal, they were, it was a lot looser back then. So I feel fortunate I captured the time when I did, because not a lot of other people were filming back then. Yeah. And not people didn't understand punk rock, and they were afraid of it, And the advertising they did for the movie when it tried to come out, never really made it, was, watch the movie because you're afraid to go to the concerts, So.
Oh, that's interesting, like introduction to Punk 101, I would say.
That's right.
Kind of. Yeah. But like speaking of introduction to Punk 101, did you feel as a filmmaker, as a documentary filmmaker, that you are also like an educator in a way, that you're, were you aware of that you can like really teach masses, let's call them that way, because masses, we know that they don't exist. There's like a bunch of people who are different, but we call them that way. But were you feeling that you are showing something else, and that's your kind of aim, or like a thing that you really wanted to do?
I don't think I would take that position of knowing something that somebody else doesn't know. I don't feel comfortable with that. But I will say that what I was doing is trying to understand myself, Like I came from a very difficult upbringing. In my house, when I'm growing up, everybody's fighting. Somebody's bloody every week, It's like I'm used to an aggressive crowd, And I think I was just trying to understand myself. And when I went to school, I studied human behavior. I studied psychobiology. And so I really was interested in why people behave a certain way, why they do what they do, and say what they say, and sing what they sing, So I'm not trying to tell anybody how to be or teach what it is, because I don't think that's my job. I'm just doing it to understand myself and my family.
Yeah, it feels like it's a bit like sociological approach
exactly.
also, right? That you are kind of
the
researching.
They call me rock and roll anthropologist.
Oh, it's a really great description. Congratulations on that, because it really suits you. Because it feels like that you are like researching and discovering, more like a David Attenborough of, like the famous guy who discovers all those cultures of different types of animals. Because of course it's like a new culture that we need to
That's
learn
what I was
about.
doing.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a nice compliment. I was discovering different kinds of animals. Exactly right.
Speaking of that, let's switch a bit to suburbia, because in that film you also are really close to subculture of punk kids, and these are like really, really young people. So I wonder, what was the difference for you as a filmmaker when you filmed them, you observed them, you researched them, and that's a documentary part, but suddenly they are actors and characters in your film. So what was the difference? Like, was that difficult to a bit, let me use that word because the metaphor of animals, tame them, those rebellious creatures that are punk kids, or was that like playing out with them, like the fun part? How that worked?
Well, all of your film fans, I'm sure, in Poland, know the work of the B movie producer Roger Corman.
Yeah, of course.
And
of course.
Yeah, and so I got half the financing from, again, some friend that I knew. I randomly met, and then I bring it to Roger Corman, and he says he's going to pay for the other half of the movie. So I told Roger that this is a movie about punk rockers, because I had to write a narrative piece because I couldn't get my punk documentary into theaters. They said it had to be narrative. So I write Suburbia, and Roger wants me to cast actors in the parts, of course, and I say, no, I want to cast real punk rockers, because I can't teach an actor to be a punk. They didn't know what it was back then, But I can teach a punk how to be an actor. So I did that, and he finally agreed. It was a big argument. But so yeah, that's when I wrote Suburbia. I was just trying to get my movies into theaters, but that didn't get into theaters either.
Of course, not of course. I mean, like it should have, but
because the subject.
But tell me, because you said I could teach the punk rocker to be an actor. So how did you do that? What was the process? Like, how did you work with them, or was more like a play and fun? Like, what was the thing?
They were essentially, as far as the character goes, the characters, they were playing themselves. And a lot of these kids I knew and cast them because I knew they could play the parts. But what I did have to teach them are the technical aspects of a narrative shooting situation, which is you got to hit your mark. You got to match your movements. If you're drinking something and then saying something, it's got to be at the same time every take, so I can cut it. And I always, you'll see in the Suburbia movie, you see all the time I cut away to the cockroaches in the house they live in. And that's because whenever somebody couldn't match their movements, then I would cut away to the cockroach. And
interesting.
I call it the cockroach shot, and so I had to teach them the technical aspects of acting on camera, But as far as the characters go, they knew punk rock. And they knew what they should and shouldn't do. Like there's a scene where when Sheila dies, that Skinner comes in and finds her passed away from an overdose, on-purpose overdose. And I never directed him to do this, but he walked over to the mirror and punched it and broke it, and that's just because he's a punk and he knows what he would do in that situation. He would go hit a wall, So they were very good. I must say, those kids were really good at it.
Yeah, it feels like they are really natural. And I love that kind of cinema that you are really incorporating the culture and working with them to show a version of themselves, or actually themselves through the acting. It's like this fiction, non-fiction kind of area, which is like really amazing part of filmmaking, and especially.
Well, that's why I love Cassavetes. You know, John Cassavetes, because that's the kind of style that you're describing, and that's exactly what I was doing when I did Suburbia. You know, and as another side note, one of my very favorite directors is Costa Gavras, and the Greek French director. And Costa and I found out that we're first cousins.
Oh wow!
His mother, my father, brother and sister.
Yeah, but at the same time, Romain Gavras, his son, is making videos that are so punk rock in style. So that kind of runs in the family. That's really interesting.
Well, I think punk rock and directing, it's in the DNA, you know.
Lucky you, I would say, lucky you. It's really really interesting connection between those two worlds, but at the same time, especially Roman films and his videos, like for MIA, for example, are just like so strong on the like the spiritual level, I would even say, and aesthetics is just like really striking. So that runs in the family, I would say.
I'm very, very proud of him.
Good job,
and
Roman.
Costa. And Costa.
I wanted to ask you because Suburbia is actually in the title, so it's like this kind of world of suburban America that was product of the crisis of cities from today's perspective. Like when we think about modernist era, people were trying to find the best way of living and like moving from the cities to the outskirts. And it feels like it's a really interesting area to show how the society is changing also. But were you also interested in that on this like urbanist level? I mean the areas, because of course the title of the movie could be different, but you put this suburbia, utopian suburbs in the title already. So I wanted to ask you about that.
Roger Corman wanted to call the movie The Wild Side. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. It's really something that happens out in suburbia. At that point it was, you know. And he said, well, people won't understand what that word means. And I said, well, too bad, you know. But I really wanted to fight for that. While I'm speaking of Corman, I will say this. He had a rule. And my original script was not quite as violent and not quite as many sex references as are in the movie. But Roger had a rule, and that is that you had to have either some sex or some violence every 10 minutes. Okay. So
that's interesting advice to the filmmaker. Like, put it every 10 minutes, for God's sake.
I know. It's like just shoehorning in a piece of violence for no other reason. But that's the formula that he used very successfully for his exploitation B movies. And he tried to impose that on my movie Suburbia, which to me was an exploration of a social phenomenon that was happening. You know, these bored, disenfranchised kids who were thrown out of their family or left because they didn't feel loved, and they form a new family. Yeah. That's what I was making a movie about. But Roger Corman was making, you know, the Wild Angels, the Naked Angels, the whatever crazy movies he did. You know,
you actually get two films in one, because what was the most striking and like the most touching for me were the scenes with the families. I mean, like the crisis of family, the crisis of the small community that they were coming from, that was supposed to be safe. But when we see this little kid with a gun, like in the very first scene, and then it comes back again, it's that's the most striking aspect of that film. I would say that the violence scene are really strong, but the violent part was actually the ones that you don't show the actual violence in. I mean the emotional and psychological violence of the destruction of family, basically. And
that's what it was about. Really, was the disintegration of the traditional family, because parents were being irresponsible. They still are, you know. And as a matter of fact, that point you just made is more prevalent today than it was back then. You know, families here anyway falling apart every day. You know, I became a foster parent so I could try and help. And when I got to know these kids, I mean, they are a wreck. You know. Yeah. Oh, you got a fly there?
Yeah, there was a fly. There was a fly.
Yeah, well, you're on the docks.
Yeah, I'm on the docks. Mosquito. But mosquitoes in Poland are just like really vicious, I would say. Like Sid Vicious wasn't vicious when you think about the Polish mosquitoes this summer. But it's really actually interesting, but because when you put suburbia next to, for example, David Lynch film Blue Velvet, when you have this like suburban evilness hiding under the, you know, under the grass in the, you know, outside of this beautiful house. Or when you take, for example, recently there was this film Assassination Nation by Sam Levinson. That's the guy who made also Euphoria TV series. It's also about this kind of suburban life as the, you know, the most problematic actually type of life nowadays. Like really unnatural.
Yeah, back then it came out of boredom. You know, I mean, I'm from suburbia. When for my high school years, we lived in the most, like, there were no trees because they destroyed all the trees. The oldest building in the town was a 7-Eleven store. Wow. And
there goes history of America.
Yeah.
Corporate country.
You get bored out there, you know, and I think when people get bored, they get creative. They should, anyway. Yeah. That's what I do.
Yeah, but, you know, like there's this like thin line between creativity and violence at the same time. So either you can put your energy into something creative or into violence. So that's also what this film, like on this under level, has for me. But I wanted to ask you, like leaving the films on the side, do you really think that punk is dead?
But you know, it's so funny that you would ask that because ever since punk was born, people have been using that phrase.
Oh, that's true.
So think about it. 1976, somebody is saying punk is dead. Okay, so now here we are, how many years later? I can't even do that math. And people are saying punk is dead. Absolutely not is the answer to that. And if you really know what punk rock is, then you know it's not dead. But the thing about punks that I love is that they don't promote themselves very much because it just advertising and capitalism and corporate greed and all that crap, you just don't want to be a part of it. And if you don't want to be a part of that, then you can't promote yourself. So
you are invisible in a way.
Exactly. And I mean, I was in Italy a few years ago, and you know, this punk rock, I can tell who's real punk, who's phony fashion freak. And so
you have the like a little.
I have punk
antenna radar.
Yeah, but this real punk came up to me and he said, "Would you like to go to the castle, the punk castle?" And I said, "Sure." So we go crawling through a tunnel under a river, and we get to this castle. And all these punks are living in there, and they're squatting, and they have the most beautiful collection of punk rock paraphernalia I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
You know, I don't know. I call punks the termites in the woodwork of America because they're there and they're working, but you don't see them.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Interesting point. So it's good to hear that you are saying that punk is really like out there and still rocking in a way, because that's what I discovered also recently. I was translating a film that was made by Adam Reimer. He's like a first-time director, American, and the film is called Dinner in America, and it's a title and the lyrics of a song. Of course, like this dinner in America is like the most problematic and dramatic part of the day with the family. But there is also like a scene when the boy is going away, not to get into details, but he says to a girl, "Stay punk," which is so nice to hear in 2020 that it's still out there. So what I wanted to also ask you, coming to the end of our conversation slowly, so from after all those years, being here today with me on Skype in 2020, would you say that you are more punk and director or director and punk?
Definitely more punk. I don't even think about myself as a director anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't like movies anymore. Oh. I don't watch movies anymore. Oh. I don't make movies anymore. I don't care about movies anymore.
But you still can talk with me about your film, so it's not that bad.
I mean, I'll talk about my old movies and everything, but, you know, I was born a punk and I'll die a punk, you know, and I could give a shit about movies. Mm-hmm.
So what I can say more apart from Penelope, please stay punk.
I will, don't worry.
You will?
No worries.
Good. We're going to try to stay punk as a Octopus Film Festival here in Poland. And hopefully, if the situation allows, I really hope to meet you one day in person and talk more about your films and what does it mean today to be a punk or it doesn't. Because it's like really, I feel that it's just the beginning of a conversation that we had today.
Oh, well, you're an excellent interviewer, and I thank you so much for having me on your show, okay?
Yeah, it was really, really great. So I'm going to switch to...
Good luck with the festival.
Oh, thank you. We are trying to stay safe, stay calm, and rock on at the same time. So it's really difficult to put all those things together. But thank you for being here with us. And I'm going to switch to Polish at the end. Dziękuję bardzo, że byliście z nami. Pozdrawiam wszystkich bardzo serdecznie i do zobaczenia na kolejnych spotkaniach w ramach Octopus Film Festiwalu. Uważajcie na siebie i trzymajcie bezpieczny dystans. Do zobaczenia.